to First. I'm Nichelle Poston along with Shirley Min and Mark Eichman. The legislative all-nighter known as June 30th is done. What did state lawmakers accomplish?
Support for Delaware's casinos was passed, but what about the items that didn't? Jonathan Starkey of the News Journal stops by to break it all down.
And a holistic approach to horse health is our first experience. It could change the way you think of the blacksmith. It's your holiday weekend edition of First, and it starts right now.
A balanced budget for the state of Delaware? Check. A $10 million state support package for casinos? Check. Downtown development, Fort DuPont redevelopment? Check, check. Those are some of the things done during Delaware's legislative session. We break down our first look this week through what passed and what didn't pass. Let's start with the comments from Monday night.
So we've made great strides this year. Of course, our work is ongoing. As you all know, I remain committed to addressing our transportation funding gap and what I believe to be the embarrassing condition of our waterways.
10 cents scares a lot of people, scares the public, and they were reacting to what the public was telling them. I mean, I can tell you, we did, some really not scientific polling, but we did some polling and everything in different districts, and it was very, very high against doing a 10-cent gas tax.
So you think that we're gonna see the gas tax again next year, water tax, or some sort of?
No, I don't really think so. I think that those are items that started that discussion, but at the end of those discussions, we were moving to things that were more reasonable in that approach. So there's a lot of things out there I think we could talk about. We'll start someplace and then we'll work towards an agreement on that, and I think it's doable. But there's got to be some ideas that are philosophically on our side of that issue.
3 different points of view on the clean water and gas tax that did not get passed. Joining me to kick off our recap of the legislative session that just ended is Shanna O'Malley. You see on newsworks.org/Delaware and hear her on WHYY-FM. Shanna, there was a lot of conversation, it seems like, on something that did not get passed. The governor could not do anything to change their minds. Is that so?
Yeah, I think that when it came to the gas tax initiative and the clean water initiative, they polled some of their constituents in different districts, and the lawmakers really just listened to that reaction, and the result was, that they just can't afford any sort of increase this year.
Well, the other item, the casino bill, kept everyone up very, very late. Let's listen to Senator Brian Bushweller.
SB 220 is a little better than a Band-Aid because it does make a permanent change starting in fiscal 16 with regard to sharing the cost of the vendors. But still, it's a Band-Aid in the sense that it is not a permanent solution to the problem. And I still think there is an understanding that we need to come up with that permanent solution. I think when we reconvene the Gaming Commission, that notion will still be a prominent notion among members of the Gaming Commission.
Does anyone in Dover think there's a permanent solution?
I don't think they have the answer yet, but I know that it's something that they're going to work on for next session. It was a big priority to them to get something long-term done, so I think that we'll see that come up next year.
Well, the good news, several items were passed. Tell us about that.
Well, between the 2-year session, it was pretty busy. Last year they got the same-sex marriage bill done, and they reformed some of the state's gun laws. And this year they ended up reforming some of the campaign finance rules, and they also overhauled the chief medical examiner's office, which was a big priority.
There was also a nice moment recognizing Karen Peterson.
Yes, just after midnight, Ken Bolden came in. He was the clerk of the peace that married Senator Peterson and her partner Vicki last year, and he presented a nice plaque with their marriage certificate. And he also informed us that in the past year, since the law has passed, they've actually performed 2,100 ceremonies in Delaware.
Awesome. Thanks for the update. That's Shanna O'Malley. Find her work on newsworks.org/Delaware and on Twitter at Shanna O'Malley. Up next, Jonathan Starkey of the News Journal.
Let's continue our breakdown of this legislative session with Jonathan Starkey of the News Journal. He was at Leg Hall all night Monday into Tuesday, and we welcome him to First. Glad to have you back, Jonathan.
Thanks a lot, Shirley. How are you?
I'm great. You well rested? You've recuperated?
Not quite. We were there till 4:30 or so, 5 o'clock in the morning on Monday, so
well,
it's a little too long to be at Legislative Hall.
The gas tax, water tax both fell flat. Were you surprised by that?
I don't think so. I mean, I guess if you'd have told me in January that nothing really would get done, I'd be surprised. But they, I mean, as the year went on, they even had kind of leadership Democrats against the plan, and it didn't, by March, April, it didn't look like they were going to get much done, and it, both of them definitely fell flat. We never saw a bill on either one, so they're really high profile in January, never saw a bill, and they kind of failed by June 30th. So.
Markell was lobbying hard, so was DENREC Secretary Colin O'Mara. Could more have been done to push it? I
think more it could have been done before the session. I think that, you know, we talked to lawmakers, and even the governor himself said the other night that I think that if he would have done more to court lawmakers before the session or bring them into conversations, that might have made a difference, because as it was, he came out in January in his State of the State and said, here's what I think we should do, and it took a lot of lawmakers, especially those who have elections in November, by surprise, and they said, you know, kind of hold up on this. We're not sure we want to take votes on taxes in an election year.
The gas tax, water tax, you see it coming back next session in January?
I think it will come back next session. It is worth saying that they did, that there was this kind of last-minute deal to raise tolls along Route 1 in Dover and Biddle's just south of the Roth Bridge, and authorize about $20 million in debt to do paving projects. But I do think gas tax and water tax will come back post-election season, so we'll probably see it back in January.
Yay!
something to cover. It'll be fun anyway.
Well, the casinos now with the near $10 million bailout. Supporter Senator Brian Bushweller, he was saying even it is a Band-Aid. Is there a more permanent solution out there?
There was the recommendation that came from the committee that a couple of Governor Markell's cabinet officials sat on, had a 2-year plan, so there would be about $10 million in the first year and another $10 million in the second year would make up a kind of permanent solution. There was state sharing vendor costs in the casinos, so they'd help pay the bills for the guys who bring the slot machines in. And then they would, in the second year, you would phase in some tax cuts for the casinos. So I think we'll see a plan that's more like that next year, whereas the plan that passed late on June 30th was just the first part, so the shared vendor costs. Okay. So I do think we'll see that come back as well. Given
that we did this bailout, every session I feel like I hear some lawmakers say, we need more casinos. Delaware needs more than 3 casinos.
Right.
Is that argument moot at this point?
I'm not sure it's moot. I mean, I know there are some people who would like to see that happen, although I'm not sure the administration is behind it. I'm not sure the governor's behind it. And I think if you talk to casino executives, they would say we're not going to have more gamblers. It would just move gamblers to the closest casino, so it wouldn't necessarily bring in more revenue. I'm not real sure where the discussion is on that, but it didn't seem to be taken seriously this year, the option to open another casino.
The governor signed a bill getting rid of the medical examiner's office, created an entirely new division. It seemed like it happened really quickly. What have you heard from lawmakers? It
did happen quickly. Lawmakers mostly liked it. There was some pressure outside of the building from the Medical Examiners Association and defense lawyers who said that this is inappropriate to put a new crime lab under control of law enforcement. It's not going to be housed in the Department of Safety and Homeland Security. It's the same unit that oversees the Delaware State Police. But mostly inside the building, they said, this came after drugs went missing from the Medical Examiner's crime lab, and they all thought they should get something done. The governor's office says, look, all around the country, crime labs are associated with law enforcement departments, so this is not a big deal, although I think time will tell on that, whether they acted too quickly.
The session's over, but now it's campaign season for you. Any interesting campaigns we should be keeping an eye on?
I think the treasurer's race is interesting. There's the incumbent first-term treasurer, Chip Flowers, has a primary opponent who worked as an aide to Governor Jack Markell and to U.S. Senator Tom Carper. So they'll face each other in September, and so that should be interesting. There's also an auditor's race that the only Republican statewide candidate elected official left, Tom Wagner. We'll see if he's able to keep his seat. He has a pretty well-known Democrat running against him. So we'll watch those two races. Also, Matt Dent running for Attorney General. And he has a Republican opponent, but he looks like he's doing pretty well so far. So we'll see what happens.
All right, Jonathan Starkey of the News Journal, thank you so much for joining us here on the set. You can read Jonathan's work at DelawareOnline.com. You can also follow him on Twitter at JW
Coming up on First, a natural way to care for horses is our first experience this week. We head to Ellendale to see the work of Dan Lynch.
We'll pick up the leg haul discussion again during State of Play, but now Senator Chris Coons is here for our first person segment this week. Senator, thank you for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. Good to be with you.
So you and I were at a rather remarkable ceremony earlier this week when the final group of National Guard soldiers from Delaware left Afghanistan and arrived here back in Delaware. What's kind of your thoughts on the ramping down of that?
Well, first, it was a great way to begin 4th of July week, to be with friends and family, with literally hundreds of Delawareans who celebrated as the first detachment of the 150th Engineers returned from their year-long deployment. Just to emphasize, though, the week before we had a deployment ceremony for 2 units of the Air National Guard who are beginning a term of service, one as aeromedical evacuation, paramedics of the air, essentially, who go to very dangerous combat situations where Americans or Afghan allies have been injured in combat, and another engineering unit that's going to be fixing base facilities. So there are still Delaware National Guardsmen being deployed at the beginning of their tours of service. I do think it is important that we continue to responsibly draw down our forces in Afghanistan, and as the current election season winds up, it is my real hope that we will see an independent, competent Afghan government, and over the next 2 years, as we pull out all American forces and end our active participation in supporting the Afghan government, that we are able to leave behind a sustainable, positive force in the Afghan military and the Afghan government. And
next door, Iraq in the news again. As a member of the Foreign Relations Committee, how concerned are you about the situation there and the developments?
I'm gravely concerned about recent developments in Iraq. Iraq's on the other side of Iran from Afghanistan, and Iran is in many ways a key driver, player in the region, and I'm very concerned that we are ending up, at least for the short term, on the same side as Iran in a fight against Shiite extremists. This group, ISIS or ISIL, they go by different acronyms, is increasingly well-equipped, well-funded, lethal, clear in their intent to attack America and American interests. And I think we're in a very difficult spot. I would not support the reintroduction of American combat troops. I think having finally gotten out of combat in Iraq was an important step forward. But I do think we have to be very mindful of the real threat to the United States and our interest in the region posed by this group. And I will support limited action, strikes, possibly even jet fighter attacks against ISIL positions if they come close to overthrowing the Iraqi government.
When they come back, there's been a lot of troubles at the VA, and you've spoken on many occasions about the need to care for our veterans, and you sent a letter to the Delaware VA facility asking questions about their operations and whether these delays were seen here in Delaware as well. Were you happy with the response?
Well, I was pleased I got a response, and that there has been progress in reducing the backlog in Delaware, and that there's been progress in the leadership of the VA. The President has nominated Robert McDonald, who used to be the head of Procter & Gamble, a very large multinational operating company, and a West Point graduate and a Ranger. There was a culture throughout the country in the VA that did not convey truthfully to the leadership what was going on in the ground in local facilities all over the country. And we've got some broader questions to tackle. I continue to get individual concerns and complaints raised to me and to my veterans advocate, and I welcome any Delawareans who've got challenges in terms of accessing VA services to make sure that we're able to help them. I do generally hear from veterans that the quality of care at our VA is very good, that the nurses, the doctors are caring professionals, but the challenge they've had is the wait times, making sure that veterans are able to get the medical care that they've earned. We did pass on a bipartisan basis a bill that would provide for a 2-year relief to allow VAs with long waiting lists to refer veterans to local physicians. There's a significant cost attached with that, and we're going to need to work together in a responsible, bipartisan way to resolve the VA's challenges going forward.
Let's shift over to your role as a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. You've been working on funding for child advocacy centers which is a big part in the fight against child abuse. You've also been watching the Supreme Court, but talk a little bit about your efforts with the child advocacy centers.
Well, I've worked closely with Republican Senator Roy Blunt of Missouri on two different issues. Reauthorizing the Bulletproof Vest Partnership, which has provided life-saving bulletproof vests to thousands of police officers, nearly 1 million police officers all over the United States over 20 years, and the Victims of Child Abuse Act, which you referenced. In both cases, there is one Republican senator from Oklahoma who has prevented those laws from being reauthorized year in and year out. And to me, inexplicably, the administration chose, because of that, to defund completely the Victims of Child Abuse Act, the child advocacy centers that it funds, 2 years ago. So I worked with Republican Senator Roy Blunt, as I mentioned, and Jeff Sessions of Alabama, Democratic Senator Mazie Hirono of Hawaii, and the four of us over the last year were able to get past the objections that Senator Coburn had, and the Senate finally, just last week, unanimously reauthorized the Victims of Child Abuse Act. There are 3 children's advocacy centers in Delaware. What they do is make it possible, one time, one place, for a child victim of abuse to be interviewed in a way that can be used in court, but to not have to be interviewed a second and third and fourth time at a hospital, at a detective's office, at trial.
A couple of Supreme Court reactions on the rulings there at the end. Hobby Lobby, the ruling on contraception, quick reaction to that?
Hobby Lobby, frankly, deeply puzzles me in terms of where the court is going, in that it opens up, I think, a potential minefield here. It's easy, I suspect, in this case, in these narrow facts, when you've got one family that completely owns a small business. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not a small business. It's actually a multi-billion-dollar nationwide business with thousands and thousands of employees. I'm concerned that, particularly from Delaware's perspective, where we are one of the leading states from corporation, this raises all sorts of difficult questions about corporations. Corporations are structures, legal structures, that insulate individuals from the liability of business activity. Why the court chose to allow corporations to have the same rights as individuals in terms of free exercise of religion, I don't fully understand, and I think the consequences of this will be difficult for courts to implement going forward.
All right, Senator Coons, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we hope to have you back hopefully later before the summer is over, when we can talk to candidate Chris Coons about the coming election.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for your time. You can watch this interview when you click on the First Person tab on newsworks.org/Delaware.
First is available to you in many forms. Online, you can check out WHYY.org/first. This show is available on Monday. Past shows are there right now. You can also sign up for our e-newsletter. It's a great way to find out what's coming up on the show. There's more of First right after this.
Thanks for making WHYY where you go to know. Your support allows us to deliver truly original programs for Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. First, Delaware's only dedicated weekly news magazine. On canvas, on stage, and behind the curtain. Friday Arts. Discover the region's hidden arts treasures. Make a pledge of $100 and you can request a pair of round-trip walk-on tickets for the Cape May Lewis Ferry. Call 1-888-345-9499 or visit WHYY.org/support.
So let's wrap up our coverage of the 147th General Assembly with State of Play. Here with me are Stephanie Hansen, former Newcastle County Council President, now with the law firm of Young, Conaway, Starkey and Taylor. Also here is Michael Safford. He is an attorney and syndicated columnist whose work has been featured on MSNBC. There's a lot of directions where we could take this, but let's start with the surprises. Do you think the governor could have lobbied harder for clean water or road repairs, or is this the way business is done here? Float an idea one year and it's taken up the next.
Well, I think he certainly could have lobbied harder for it, particularly with the clean water side of the bill. I mean, he launches a major initiative. It's in the press. But then there's not that sustained effort. You know, the governor's office really gives you a pulpit. You have the ability to focus attention on a particular issue that, you know, legislators and other public officials don't have. He focuses on it, but it's not sustained attention. Then he moves on to something else. The issue kind of disappears. You know, looking on Google, there hasn't been anything written about this initiative in months here in Delaware. So rather than going out and trying to build constituencies, meeting with local groups and saying, hey, this is what it's going to mean for you, he floats the idea and then it almost seems like it disappears. There's a real lack of sustained effort with it.
I think also the exit of the current DENREC secretary probably took over a lot of the attention as well. I mean, as much as you'd like to think it was kind of a continuation, I think that became the story, the kind of natural resources story afterwards. But, you know, that being said, yeah, when you have big major initiatives like this, they do tend to go introduce it, kind of throw it out there, get people talking about it one year, bring it back the next year during the next session and really start to work it that way. So, and it just didn't rain enough in June. If it had rained more in June and there was flooding and there was the issues with stormwater management that we normally see, you probably would have seen more discussion about it.
If only there was a major infrastructural problem that had everybody focused on the conditions of the roads. Oh, wait, there is.
That's right.
But I mean, is that going to translate into, you know, a gas tax? I think I still am pretty skeptical about that.
Well, I think so. Plus, the Fed stepped in and are helping us out quite a bit, so we kind of dodged that bullet at least for now. And we were able to raise the tolls on Route 1. You know,
you agree with
so
that?
Yeah. So that's going up from $2 to $3, I think, on the weekends, which, you know, ostensibly is really supposed to translate over into taking the money out of the pockets of people that don't live in Delaware who are going to be going back and forth over the bridge because everybody else can take the little exit off of Route 1 and get. I do that.
Correct.
I'm guilty. Downtown development passed because it was discussed early. And it was discussed early and it was passed early. I mean, this was something that was passed back in mid-May or so. And it really sort of was able to follow on the heels of brownfields redevelopment and whatnot, because everybody recognizes that brownfields, you know, for every, I think the quote is now, for every dollar of state investments, you get $17.50 back in increased revenue and resources because of it. So that's, if you can find a way to take your bill and make it sort of like a brownfields redevelopment bill, then it'll pass. And I think that the downtown development issue was able to kind of glom onto that a bit, and it was done early. With the voter registration, that was late in the game, and it didn't have a real vocal constituency. It had some.
The Republican Party generally, you know, nationally, has been moving in the direction of restricting voting rights and voting access. And so, you know, a bill that was going to, you know, potentially open that up further here in Delaware, it had a guaranteed opposition. And as you said, the supporters just didn't, there wasn't enough there to get it over the hump. I think we could deal with some of the issues about, you know, incarcerating people for personal use, stigmatizing people with a criminal record that then follows them throughout life. I think we can address that and adopt a more therapeutic approach to treatment while still keeping it illegal in the state.
Do you think would Matt Dinn actually campaign for it?
Only if he's high. No, I don't think that it's something that Matt has any need to or desire to. He's politically smart enough not to do that.
If you think about attorney general's races, attorney general, when you're running for attorney general, you want to appear tough on crime. So if I was Matt, I would stay back. I would let other people take the lead on this particular one. Why open yourself up to another avenue of attack?
Well, unlike the legislature, we can't stop the clock, so our time has run out. Thanks so much for being a part of State of Play. Stephanie Hansen, Michael Stafford. You can watch this segment when you click the drop-down box in the upper right-hand side of newsworks.org/Delaware.
First experience now. Dan Lynch has been around horses all of his life. A decade ago, he discovered a new way to care for one of his ailing horses. He now uses a holistic approach to care for other horses he meets through his business, Delaware Natural Hoof Care, where Dan works to train and educate others about its benefits.
Come here, baby boy. Some people say that a horse has 5 hearts, well, 4 of them are their hooves. What we do nowadays with the natural hoof care and without shoes is we're molding the foot, shaping the foot like they found it in the wild on the Mustangs. I had horses all my life, shod, put shoes on, everything. Then this mare, we were feeding her this grain, trying to get some weight on her, and she foundered on me, which is where the coffin bone breaks loose and rotates in the hoof. And I got on the internet and, man, like boom, boom, you know, natural hoof care, and they wanted to set the coffin bone back down to ground parallel where it's supposed to be, and relieve the stress on the damaged lamina, and it just made perfect sense to me, and there was nobody around here doing it. It's primarily being able to let the foot expand and contract to aid in blood flow, which helps with absorbing the higher frequencies of energy on impact. From there, I just went clinics, and just anywhere I could go, learned about this, and then this just took off. And here we are. It's been very exciting.
I do basically the same thing Dan does. We do the natural hoof care for the horses. It's something probably fairly new within the last 10 years that has started to catch on. And we like to just model our horses after what nature intended. I got into this because I started looking at my shod horses' feet. And I kept looking at them and thinking, you know, they're just starting to look worse and worse. I've known Dan for 10 years, but it took me that long to call Dan and say, I need your help. Now that I see how much better my horses' feet look even after 8 months, you know, I feel bad that I've had my horses shod for 30-some years.
I do alternative medicine. For horses, my main deal is acupuncture and chiropractic, and I can also do herbals. And I can treat, you know, a lot of stuff with that. There's an ancient Chinese saying, no hoof, no horse. So, you know, if my chiropractic adjustments are going to hold, they've got to have good feet, which is why I've been getting up with Dan a lot and making sure that, you know, he can take care of my patients and that they can be the best they can be.
Change is hard. I think that's the worst part. Change is hard for me. But the whole natural way of doing it is just doing it like it is in nature, how the horse interacts, how the hoof grows. That foot has been evolving for 55 million years. And because we've been putting shoes on it for 1,000, we think we got it covered, and it's not so. It just isn't so. I like the training when we make a huge breakthrough. I think my favorite part of that is the saving someone else's horse, either their relationship with the horse or actually saving the horse itself is by far the best part of this whole thing.
Horse people are kind of a different breed. It's born in us. I like the fact that you help people. I have a horse right now that I'm doing, half of its hoof is rotted off. It gives me joy to make that horse better. I think that's going to be my favorite part, is helping the horse and seeing the owner be happy with what we're doing.
Dan trained Barbara, and now she handles all of the northern Delaware business, as Dan's too busy in southern Delaware these days. You can find information on them at DelawareNaturalHoofCare.com. And if you need a holistic vet, you can find Christina from our story at VetAltCare.com.
Next week, check out the Best of Delaware from Delaware Today magazine. We have a surprise to share, and Governor Markell will join us. We'll talk about what's ahead now that this legislative session is behind us.
Don't forget, you can get your Delaware news on the radio at WHYY-FM 90.9 upstate and along the Delaware beaches at 90.3. We want to give a big thank you to everyone who turned out at our live Lewis remote on Newsworks Tonight last week. That is first for this week from Mark Eichmann and Shirley Min. I'm Nichelle Polston. Thank you for watching and have a great holiday weekend.
Wilmington residents can now sign up for free emergency text and email alerts directly from the Wilmington Police Department. The department can now issue alerts which will simultaneously call landline phones, send text messages and email, and post to social media. The service is free for subscribers and registration is easy. Simply text your zip code to 888-777 or register online at nixle.com, where you can customize alert settings and choose to receive email and web alerts as well. With Nixle, you know.